Hi, good morning. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. The date is May 21st. We're continuing in the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 27. Just to remind us that, what's his name? Moses. Moses has, under the direction of God, brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. They're heading to the promised land. God knows they're not going to get there for 40 years. He knows that. They don't know that. But he is helping them, teaching them to construct a temple, well, a tabernacle. The permanent temple will be constructed 200 years later in the promised land, but they're going to construct a tent that will house the altar and the lampstand and all the things that they need in order to properly sacrifice and worship God. And because he knows you're going to need this because it's going to be 40 years before you get there. He knows it's about to happen in chapter 32. We're only in chapter 27, but he knows what's about to happen. So I want to click on my lesson, which I think is this. Yes. So today's lesson is called the altar and the lampstand. So Moses has gone back up the mountain. He's going to be there for 40 days while God instructs him on how to build the tabernacle. He's writing everything down. He's going to bring the plans back down to the people. But we're going to talk about why things need to be built in a certain way, why God was so specific, what is the purpose of everything. So in Exodus chapter 27, verse 1, it says, "And you shall make an altar." So far he's talked to them about the inner chamber where his presence is going to go, the Holy of Holies, where once a year the high priest is going to go into the Holy of Holies and present a sacrifice to God. Then immediately outside of the Holy of Holies is the holy place, where again, all the priests can work in the holy place, but only the high priest can go into the Holy of Holies. And he's told them about the table of showbread and the lampstand. And now, outside in the courtyard where the people are, common person, which is still part of the tabernacle area, but there's no covering over it. He wants them to build an altar. So, what's the purpose of the altar? When did this thing start? Let's just talk about the altar. First altar mentioned in the Bible. The word altar is first used in the 12th chapter of Genesis by Abraham. But the concept of sacrificing to God on an altar is introduced in the third chapter of Genesis. So, right after Adam and Eve sinned, Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, it says, "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked." So they had been naked. What he means is now there's a self-consciousness of it. Before, when they're just clothed with the glory of God, everything they did was of God. But they wanted to decide right and wrong. That's what the devil presents to them. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil means the tree that will help you know the difference between good and evil. And there's no such tree that where you eat a fruit and that's what it gives you some sort of power. It's the act of sin. It's the act of choosing, I know what God said, but I'm going to do my own thing. That's what opened their eyes. Because people think it was something about the fruit. There's a fruit you can eat and suddenly you can see everything around you. It was the act of defying God. It didn't matter what kind of fruit it was. And now I get to decide what's good and evil. Okay. And now I'm self-conscious. And so, oh my goodness, I'm naked. And I feel bad about it. And I've done wrong. And so it says they sewed fig leaves together and made for themselves coverings. I believe, this is not in the Bible, I believe that the fruit itself was a fig. And that's just me, because it's easier for me to think, oh, there's a fruit right there. and there's the leaves right there, and they grab the leaves as opposed to running 6 blocks. Let's go find that fig tree and get some leaves off of it. I think they just grabbed the first thing they saw, but it doesn't matter. They sewed fig leaves together, made a covering for themselves because they're self-conscious and feeling guilty. That's all their choice. God's not making them self-conscious. God's not making them feel guilty. Verse 8 says, and they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. So I love the sound of the Lord. They heard the sound. Anyway, and so the presence of the Lord, which often came and met with them and they conversed, suddenly they are embarrassed to be around God. They're hiding themselves from God. God hates me. Right. This is all because they decided they wanted to know what good and evil was. And I decided if I say I can eat this fruit, what's God to tell me what to do? And now it's like, uh-oh. So they're hiding themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden, as though you can hide yourself in the presence of the Lord. And we think we can. We think, well, let me duck in here because God can't see and hear. Let me whisper this. And God sees everything, but in their mind, God's just in one place and now he can't see me. Okay. So then the Lord God called Adam and said to him, where are you? Now God knows where they are. God's not saying this because he's lost. Where'd they go? He wants them to confess what they're thinking, what they're doing. So Adam says in verse 10, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And God, as you know, God has a conversation. Well, who told you were naked and who put these thoughts in your head and helping them see this is happening because you sinned, because you've separated yourself from me. You're now conscious of yourself. Where before, when you were just constantly in my presence, we were one. You didn't have all this guilt, all this embarrassment. You've put up a barrier now. And so in verse 21 of that same chapter, he says, also for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. So they were already clothed. They already had fig leaves around. Why did they need these tunics of skin? Well, first of all, in order to get the tunics of skin, some animals had to be sacrificed. Animals won't just, let me just unzip my skin here and hand it to you. So Moses, who's writing Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, who's reading all these books, probably doing his 40 years in the wilderness, is writing to an audience who understands blood sacrifice, altars, all that. So there are things he doesn't include because they already know that an animal obviously was sacrificed, and he's now you're going to be clothed with the skin of the sacrifice so you can be reminded of the sacrifice, that the price was paid. So sacrifice was made. They've been forgiven. God, there's nowhere saying God was still mad at them. 4 months later, God's like, don't get in my face with all that. Obviously, they've been forgiven. So forgiveness was made, an animal was sacrificed. They're clothed with the symbol of that sacrifice now. Instead of their own, you made your own covering. That don't work. Here's do what I say to do. And then you'll begin to understand what the sacrifice means and what forgiveness means. So now they're clothed and doing it God's way. So in Genesis chapter 4, so there's no mention of an altar, and they may not have needed an altar, but the idea of animal sacrifice starts there. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 3 through 6, it says, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Now, okay, that's nice, but that's not what I asked for. It says, Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering because he's bringing what God asked for. Cable's bringing a cable. Cain is bringing his own thing. Look what I did, Lord. God's like, hey, not good enough. So they understand sacrifice. We understand that just from what happens next. Verse 5 says, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was angry and his countenance fell. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? You, meaning you know what to do. God's not, what's up? Why are you angry? I don't get it. Why are you angry? I've already told you what to do. He says, and why has your countenance fallen? Verse 7. If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you bring what I ask, you'll be accepted. That's not what I asked for. That's your works is never going to um, make up for sin, right? So Abel's bringing an offering because they already understand that that concept has been passed down already. That's Abel's didn't one day think, oh, you know what? I think I'm just going to go kill a lamb. I don't even know why. They know why, and Cain knew why. And he says, and if you do not do well, sin lies at the door. If you decide to go your own way, do your own thing, that's an entire pattern of behavior that is going to take hold of you. In fact, it says its desire is for you, meaning it wants to control you. You need to be careful of your anger, that anger you got. Why are you angry? You let that control you. You know what you should do, but you think, who's God to tell me what to do? And it's a whole pattern. I don't have to. He says, be careful. Its desires for you, but you need to rule over it. You need to push that aside, which Cain did not. He instead wallowed in it and ends up killing his brother. So the idea of sacrifice for sin and presenting to God what he demands in order, because God's trying to teach a lesson from the very beginning. He knows what the ultimate sacrifice is going to be, that Jesus' blood, right? And he's trying to teach them it's about the blood of Christ. It's about the sacrifice being made for sin, and not you coming constructing your own way, doing your own thing in order to appease me. I just tell you, here's what I like. And so that's going to make me happy. You making up your own thing does not work. So in Genesis chapter 8, oh, actually, this is okay. I said it was Abraham in 12. It says, after the flood, it says Noah built an altar to the Lord, built an altar to the Lord. Genesis chapter 8, verse 20. And he took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. So this is a practice that had been handed down, obviously. And sacrifices to various gods spread from Noah's grandson, Nimrod, on out. This was just understood because it had been passed down. So in Genesis chapter 11, and Moses is doing it because, look, this person kept us safe. The whole world was judged. He spared our lives. This is my way of showing gratitude, my way of showing thanks. The altar was there. That's why there were different types of offerings to be put on the altar, which we'll get into, because it means various things. It's a way of worshiping God. It's a way of thanking God. It's a way of asking for forgiveness. It's a way of fellowshipping with God. It meant all these things to them. And so Noah's obviously doing it just so that he's to say, thank you, you spared my life. Let me give my gratitude in some way. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 4, it said, and they said, come, let us build ourselves a city. This is led by Noah's grandson. Let's build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. So you have two ways to go. I'm either going to submit, I'm going to worship God, I'm going to understand that it's He who made the universe, and that I'm blessed to have my breath in my body, and I'm blessed to be alive, and I'm blessed that He forgives my mistakes, and or you can say, you know what, I don't want to spend my time bowing down to some God. I'm going to make my own city. And the idea of a city was and still is, although God doesn't have a problem with cities, is let's build our own kingdom. Let's do our own government. Let's do our own thing. We don't want to be part of God's kingdom. And let's build our own tower. That was the original intention behind it, is we can self-govern and we can do our thing, which is why in a lot of places they'll begin even a civil ceremony with prayer, because they're acknowledging we don't want to do our own thing. We need God's guidance. So it's not like, God, you can't live in a city. Cities are cursed. It's the idea of we don't need God. We go do our own thing. God's like, you can do your thing as long as you acknowledge that I'm the one that needs to guide you in it. Oh, you're about to go into a new home, you're about to go into a new place. Yes, look to me and you're good. Think, I don't need to worry God about this, or I don't need God to even think about this. I'm gonna build my own tower. I, because their goal is like, and I don't know what they thought. They honestly looked in the sky and thought, we'll make it up to heaven and we'll be God ourselves, which is what the devil thought. I'll exalt my throne above God. And so the altar and the way that Noah was trying to teach his kids is our acknowledgement. We can't do anything without God. God deserves all that we have, but only as that we give a tenth. That we, but it's our way of acknowledging God. You got it. I don't got it. I don't want it. Let you run everything. Or like Nimrod began to lead people in the idea of we don't need God. We can be our own gods.
Nimrod.
You Nimrod. So Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 says, and now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. So God appears to him. God hadn't spoken to anyone like this in generations. Abraham believes that voice and he starts walking and he makes it to this land. And then God says to him, God didn't say another word to him. He just starts walking. God will do that sometime. Like your GPS. Again, if you're going right, your GPS doesn't interrupt you until it's time to make a new turn, right? But if you're going in the right direction, the GPS doesn't say, "Oh, that's good. Ooh, you just go 3 blocks. That's great. Oh, 5 more blocks. Yeah, right." Because you're going fine. And so long as if Abraham had gotten off course, God would have stopped him and spoke. Um, but he's on course, so God didn't say another word to him because God's leading him, God's guiding him. And then in verse 7 of chapter 12, it says, then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your descendants, I'm going to give this land. And he looks around. Oh my goodness, this land? Because he didn't say where or how much. And he looks around and he's standing in the perfect place just to see miles and miles and miles. So it says, and there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So we hear Noah, an altar, Abraham, an altar. And Abraham teaches his kids. So they understand an altar. God's just telling them how to build it. This concept is of sacrificing to God in thankfulness and acknowledgement of their sin and worship been established for years. He's just telling them how to build it. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 16, he says, go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared to me saying, I have surely visited you and seen what is done to you in Egypt. So he's talking to Moses. I want you to go to gather the elders and say, God has seen everything that you're going through. I'm now visiting you because I'm about to make a move. Verse 17, and I've said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and to a land flowing with milk and honey. I've promised that, and now it's time for that to happen. Verse 18, it says, and then they will heed your voice, he tells Moses, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you shall say to him, the Lord God of Hebrews has met with us now. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. So that was the purpose. I'm going to bring you out. You're going to sacrifice. Now, Pharaoh could have said yes, and it would have been 3 days, but God knew he wasn't going to say yes. So God kept lengthening the time, and then finally says, okay, now you have to let them just go free. But just know this is because of your stubbornness. But the objective is to learn to sacrifice to the Lord, because in Egypt they were learning to sacrifice to other gods and bringing them fruit. And so it's like, no, I've got to reconnect you to what I originally taught Adam and Eve, down through Noah, through Abraham, that I'm the Lord and that you're supposed to have this conversation with me. So now they're there, knowing that's the purpose. So here's the main purpose for the people. So in the court, because again, it's divided into 3 sections. There's the court where the altar is, then where all the people could gather because that's their section. We want to reconnect with God. Then the blood was taken in to the inner court where the priest went, and then there was the inner court, the Holy of Holies, right? But now he's saying, let's discuss this outer court. But he says, I want you to build it of acacia wood. Now, here's why I'm stopping, because you won't remember because this was 7 months ago when we were in Exodus chapter 20. But in Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, it says, "An altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall sacrifice on it." So right now he's saying build it of wood, but he says, "An altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone," let's say you make it of stone, "you shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it." So he says, here's your choices. Here's earth. You can build it just of earth, or you can build it of stone. But in either way, I made the earth, I made the stones. You're going to get no credit for it. So why is he telling them to build an altar of acacia wood if he says, "Don't you dare"? Because that's going to go on top of the altar. He's actually saying, here's the frame, and here's how I want you to build it. Dirt and stone and all that is the barbecue pit, is the, they're making a barbecue pit because they're going to be barbecuing animals basically on it. So the earth and the stone is going to go on top of the altar. He's basically saying, here's the frame that I want you to build, and you're going to carry it with you wherever you go. And then put earth on it or stone, whatever you want to do, that you're going to lay the animals on to burn, to sacrifice, to barbecue, etc. on top of that. So this is not in opposition to what he said earlier. This is just simply the base for it. Here's the base for the altar. He says in Exodus chapter 27, verse 1, only still in verse 1, bless my heart, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. So it's a perfect square. Was about 8 feet, 8 to 9 feet, about 8.5 feet long and wide, a perfect square, and the altar shall be square. Oh, all right, if I just read 3 more words. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. So this is the frame that they're building. Again, they're going to put the earth and the stones and wood on top of it. And you shall make horns for it on its 4 corners. Its horns shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. 3 concepts here. Well, 2. So they went horns on all 4 corners. So they were to take the horns of a bull or whatever, big horns, and put it in the 4 corners. And interestingly, this was one of the most important parts of the altar, were the horns. And he says it has to be one piece with it. So however you fix it, it's just one thing. The horns are permanently part of the altar. And then overlay that around the sides with bronze, because bronze is where you are, silver in the middle, gold where I am, because I need you to see the progression that you're not where I am. If you think you are where I am, if all of it's gold where we are, it's gold where God is, then you start to think like the devil thinks, "I'm equal to God. God needs to come out and make some sacrifices to me." So he wants visually to sim the difference. There was a difference, but there is a coming together. But do not think that we are equal. We are not, because that's what's going to mess you up. That's what messed up Nimrod and all the rest. Let's just build a tower up to God. We're as good as God. We'll just say, "Hey, God, here we are. How are you?" Nope, we're not the same, and that's what's going to get you in trouble. But let's talk about that horns of the altar. The horns. What are the purpose of the horns? We're about to get to Exodus 29, and verse 11 says, "Then you shall kill the bull before the Lord by the door of the tabernacle of meeting." So when you bring an offering to me, you kill it by the door. You don't kill it on the altar. You kill it by the door. Verse 12 says, "You shall take some of the blood of the bull and put it on the horns of the altar." So that's where the blood went. The blood went on the horns of the altar with your finger, and you should pour all the blood beside the base of the altar. So the rest of the blood goes to the base of the altar. And then when you have a burnt offering, that will go, you'll burn the animal that's drained of its blood on the altar. You'll burn it on the altar, right, and light the fire, etc. But you kill it right by the entrance to go into the inner place. And then the blood is just put on the horns. The blood's just on the horns. It's not about shedding a whole bunch of blood and pouring blood all over the place and blah, blah, blah. We just need it on the horns so that you can see the blood, be reminded of the blood. But it's once the blood is gone, then there's a burnt offering, etc., happening on the actual altar. No blood on the altar. This is where kosher food comes from, because there's a certain way it's prepared. And that's why Jews say, well, we're going to eat it this way because God said we have to drain the blood and right. And so that's where the blood goes. The horns of the altar became this important thing because that's where the forgiveness happens, at the horns, interesting enough. Uh, and then that deal is done, and now the burnt offering is God saying, "See, now I'm consuming it, and I'm agreeing with your sacrifice, and I'm okaying it, and that the blood is done. Now let's get to the forgiveness part." So I don't want you to sit there and watch blood boil and all that stuff. That's not what this is about. In Leviticus chapter 4, verse 34, again, he's just reiterating what I just said. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and pour all the remaining blood at the base of the altar. Okay? In 1 Kings chapter 150, when people would sin and they were looking for forgiveness and they were in trouble, they would grab the horns of the altar. That's where the forgiveness took place. That's where the blood was. Now, Adonijah was afraid of Solomon. This is Solomon's stepbrother, who's trying to take over. He said, so he arose and went and took hold of the horns of the altar, because that's why everybody would always grab the horns of the altar when they were in trouble. They were running from somebody. Just grab the horns of the altar, because that's where the forgiveness took place, at the horns. Not
Safe.
yes, safe. Right. So it's not about this bloody altar all over the place and the animal frying in blood. Just take your finger, dip it on the horns, because that's all it takes. It's just a little bit. But that became in their minds the place to grab if you're in trouble, because that's where the forgiveness took place, interestingly. Okay, so Exodus chapter 27, verse 3. Also you shall make its pans to receive its ashes, and its shovels, and its basins, and its forks, and its fire pans, and you shall make all its utensils of bronze. So obviously once the animal is burnt, the ashes got to go someplace, and you're going to shovel, and the basin for the blood, and the forks that you're going to eat the meat with, but not the burnt parts, and its fire pans, etc. All that you're using in order to cook the offering. And now we're sharing in the forgiveness, because forgiveness is done. The blood's on the horns. Now the rest of it is proof of the forgiveness happening. All those instruments, he said, make them bronze. Everything outside is going to be bronze. Bronze, silver, then gold, right? And on the network, you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. And this is where the poles are going to go. In verse 6, it says, and you shall make poles for the altar and poles of acacia wood and overlay them with bronze. Because I don't want you to touch the altar with your hands. The poles go, and then you'll pick it up whenever you have to move, and you'll carry it by the poles, and you'll let it down. But don't you come in contact with my work. I'm doing a work. I'm working here. I'm doing a work, right? I'm forgiving. And so don't touch it, because then you think you'll have a part of it. You'll be Cain saying, look what I did. See all this food I grew? See how my part of forgiveness is, look what I did. And God's like, I'm training you to know it's my work. I do the forgiveness. You don't have to even worry about it. So verse 7 says, the pole shall be put in the rings, and the pole shall be on the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. Now, the court of the tabernacle. In Exodus chapter 27, verse 9. It says, let's see, okay, you shall also make the court of the tabernacle. For the south side there shall be hangings for the court made of fine woven linen, 100 cubits long for one side. So he's basically going to say there's a tent that goes around the whole thing, because the inner sanctuary and the inner sanctuary have coverings over them. We did that the last time we were teaching. The outer thing has no covering. There's nothing there yet. So you're going to make this court that goes around the whole thing. And 30 cubits of it, or however much of it, that's going to be the inner court, right? That you can go in and out of, have the altar there. There's no roof. So now he's just creating that like a fence that's going to go around the whole thing. But it's a fine woven linen, 100 cubits long for one side, and it's 20 pillars, and their 20 sockets shall be bronze. So it's going to be I think it's like 8, 2, 2, and 8, something like that. Pillars, and they're so far apart. And you're going to hang the tent on these pillars, and even the hooks are going to be of bronze. The sockets will be of bronze, but the hooks of the pillars and their bands shall be silver, in verse 10. So It goes from bronze to silver. That's that joining. Silver is like the joining, and then gold is where God is. Bronze is where you are, and the silver is kind of where we meet in the middle. So there's always God wants to say we do join together, but just know that we are different, but we're joining together. Exodus chapter 26, verse 16. Just skipping through. Now, for the gate of the court, there should be a screen 20 cubits long to get into the court, woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread. Blue is for God, scarlet is for man, and the purple is the mixing together. Uh, I've just thought of this. This has nothing to do with anything. But blue and red, God could have chosen all kinds of colors. He picked blue and red. This is in my brain because those are my wife's favorite colors, blue and red. And not because she read the Bible, but who knows? Maybe when she was a child or something. But blue and red, those are the colors those are God's colors. Blue for God, red for us, and then purple is that mixing in the middle. So the screen, he wants us to see the mixing and fine woven linen made by a weaver. It shall have 4 pillars and 4 sockets. So that's kind of the gate to get in. Exodus chapter 27, verse 18 says, and the length of the court shall be 100 cubits, the width 50 throughout. Kind of like a football field, not quite those same proportions, but it's a rectangle. And the height of this fence that goes all around, that's just made of linen, is 5 cubits. So again, it's 8.5 feet tall, made of fine woven linen, and its sockets of bronze. So he's just now you've got the court, and now there's a place for the altar to go. I'm skipping to Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. It says, and you shall command the children of Israel that they bring you pure oil of pressed olives. So he's done describing the altar and the outer court. Now let's get back to that lampstand, and because he described how to build it in the previous chapter, but now how you keep it going. You shall bring pure oil of pressed olives for the light, to cause the lamp to burn continually. And continually is everything constantly. This does not mean that it never, ever, ever goes out, but I'll explain. But it continually, on a daily basis, they're going to light the light daily. The pure oil of pressed olives, there's a certain technique where you're pressing the olives, and the oil that comes out, you use the finest oil of that, and it's the pure, and it takes time to make, but that's the best, sweet smelling and lasts the longest kind of oil. In Zechariah chapter 4, Zechariah gets a vision of the lampstand. He says, now the angel who talked with me came back and wakened me, as a man who is wakened out of his sleep. And he said to me, what do you see? So I said, I'm looking, and there was a lampstand of solid gold with a bowl on top of it, right where the oil's going to go. And on the stand are 7 lamps with 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. And 2 olive trees are by it. So God has said, keep bringing this oil because I want it to burn every day. Because I want to get you at a vision in your mind that God is always present, that his light is always leading you. So he's got a vision that there are actual 2 olive trees on either side of it. One by the right of the bowl and the other at its left. And so I answered and spoke to the angel, verse 4 of Zechariah 4. I answered and spoke to the angel who talked with me and saying, what are these, my Lord? And the angel who talked with me answered and said to me, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my Lord. He's thinking, that's why I said, what are these? But you don't get smart with angel. So he answered and said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. You've heard this verse. These olive trees, and it's like there were pipes connected from the olive tree to the lampstand. And in their vision, he's saying this is how God sees it. That the oil, because they had to go and press the oil every day. They had to find the olives. They had to do all this stuff and have it ready so they can relight the lamps every day. But he says in God's mind, it's like in heaven, there's a lampstand And again, this is how God wants them to see this, that have olive trees that are always flowing, that are always flowing. In heaven, the light never goes out. God doesn't want them to get burnt up. So the they would have enough oil for it to last for a certain amount of hours, and then it would go out. And then the next morning, when they'd come back, they would relight it. But we have no accidents. We don't want the tent to catch on fire. So as long as somebody's awake and monitoring it, and then we're good. But you're going to light it continually, every day, daily. Daily would be a better word than continually. But it's not lit constantly. How do we know that? That it wasn't. But you said it was every day, but not 24 hours a day. In Exodus chapter 30, verse 8, it says, "And when Aaron lights the lamps at twilight, he shall burn incense on it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations." So we know that Aaron lit the lamps at twilight, in the morning, as it's coming today. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3. Samuel is a young boy and he's in the temple with the priest who slept in the temple, in the tabernacle, because they didn't have a temple at the time. And before the lamp of the God went out in the tabernacle of the Lord, where the ark of God was, this is Samuel 3:3. And while Samuel was lying down, that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, "Here am I." So before the lamp of God went out in the tabernacle of the Lord, where the ark of God was, so we know that it went out. And while Samuel was lying down, the Lord called to Samuel, and he answered, "Here am I." So it's starting to go out. Once they go to sleep, once the priest starts to nod off and go to sleep, the lamp's going to go out. Then when they wake up, they relight it. So there was a time, obviously, it went out, and there's a time that they relit it. So so the word continuously should have been just translated daily. Okay, so that's the lamp. So uh, about this lamp, he's telling you what type of oil to use. And in Exodus chapter 27, verse 21, and this last verse we'll do today, in the tabernacle of meeting, outside the veil, which is before the testimony, Aaron and his sons shall tend it from evening until morning before the Lord. It shall be a statute forever to their generations on behalf of the children of Israel. So that's their job, because I want people to always, oh, I said the exact opposite of when it was lit. During the day, when you go in, God is lighting it with the sun. I said the opposite of the twilight. So at night, they're tending it, and and it lasted a certain time until they fell asleep. And then they would relight it at twilight. So sorry. And then, but during the day, God lit the temple when they'd open the curtains, the light of God's Son was lighting it. But they wanted there to be a light always. So either the sun was lighting it or they were lighting it. And it would last for a while, and they'd kind of nod off, and it would slowly burn out. Just said the opposite. Bless my heart. So he wants this to be a memorial for all generations. You may sleep, but God not asleep. He who watches over Israel slumbers not nor sleeps. So while you sleep, my light's still burning. Sorry, I had a brain fart. My light's still burning. There's never a time that I'm not watching over you. That's the image. That's the image he wants to put in their head. Apparently, I'll just make something up. And so he's all the things that are going on in the temple are constructed to teach about God's character, about his provision, about how we approach God. We can use these lessons. We don't have to have a lamp burning in our house any longer. We don't, because we now have the Bible. So he gave them a visual Bible. We have the actual Bible we can just read. but they didn't have an actual Bible. Moses was working on the first five books. Um, but I want to give you a visual Bible so that you can learn about me every day and see it every day. When you wake up, you see the tabernacle, you see the altar, you know that the lamp is burning, you know that my presence is hovering, and that will change your behavior. You'll make better choices in life because you'll understand your position and my position and how I want to protect you and how everything that I'm doing is for your good. This is what parents are saying to their kids. I'm telling you things for your good. I'm telling you stay away from this person for your good. I'm telling you I think you should get some sleep before that test for your good. I'm telling you, that you need to eat something. You're going to fall out for your good. And you could either think, my parents don't know nothing, or you can think, let me listen to these people because they seem to be right. They seem to be older than me and know more than I do. I'm 7 years old and I think I'm telling my parents how life works. So maybe I'm dumb. And we do the same thing to God. We're telling God, God, I got this. And God's like, no, yeah, I've already been in tomorrow. I actually know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you need to listen to, I actually know what's going to happen if you get in that car and while you're angry and drunk. And so listen to me. And he gave them visual examples of how he works so they can learn. We have the word, so we can learn about God and go, oh, okay, I get you, God. Your presence that's always available. You've given an altar, you've given a means that if I mess up, the altar is there so we can bridge that gap and we can fellowship together in an instant because I just, oh, forgive me, Lord, and it's that fast. Just a little bit of blood on the horns. Don't need any big ceremony. The rest is about fellowshipping, right, with God. And that lamp is there to remind us his presence is always there. The, there's always lamp lit so that we can know and relax and sleep in peace and say, God, I'm not going to worry about tomorrow because God's got it. God's already been there. I'm going to go to bed and relax. When I wake up, there'll be new mercies. It says, morning by morning, new mercies I see. God will have something new for me. And I'm going to wake up in what he's promised me and not stress myself out knowing that God has an answer. Okay, so I'm all done. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. I am preaching today on now we're in 1 Samuel chapter 17, looking at the story of David and Goliath in a way I don't think you've heard it in this way before. So if you'd like to listen, Donna and others who are just so nice and just keep wanting to listen, because if the rest of you like, no, I think I've heard your voice enough. I'm good. Anyway, so that's today around 11 o'clock. All right, thanks so much. And I will see you, some of you Wednesday, some of you next Sunday. All right, thanks.